Um, anyway, this is the other story that I covered yesterday, but CNN is now entertaining it as well. The war against Iran has become a war against our big, beautiful troops, our troops in the Navy. U.S.S. Abraham Lincoln, ladies and gentlemen. U.S.S. Abraham Lincoln was supposed to be relieved months ago at this point. They are overspent and on the verge, from what I understand, on the verge of mutiny. Okay? That's right. U.S. sailors are trying to jump ship after 250 days at sea.
That multiple sailors aboard the U.S.S. Abraham Lincoln have tried to jump overboard amid poor conditions and mental stress on the ship. This is according to new reporting from the Military Times, which spoke to the wife of one of those sailors, who says she's spoken to her husband only a handful of times since he tried to jump. He is now on a medical hold. The Military Times is also reporting severe food shortages on board and that sailors are running out of just basic needs: toothpaste, deodorant, soap. This crew has been at sea for 9 months amid Trump's war in Iran. That includes 250 consecutive days without setting foot on land. 250 consecutive days. That is a record. Out front now, Natalie Olivero. She is the Military Times journalist who broke the story, and she is also a Navy veteran. Natalie, I appreciate your time. I mean, the details you have in this story are really stunning. I mean, my jaw drops. You know, we're talking about the U.S.S. Abraham Lincoln, and you're talking about things that I think people struggle to understand are happening in the U.S. military. You've spoken directly with some of these families, and you're reporting on incidents involving sailors apparently trying to jump overboard. You spoke to the wife of one of them, I know, and her husband served in the Navy for more than a dozen years, 13 years. So what have you learned?
Thanks for having me, Erin, and for covering this story. Speaking with Miss Saloma, she is extremely worried and concerned about how her husband is actually doing. And until she can be in front of him and see him with her own eyes, she's not really going to be able to answer that question. And facing the stresses that every military spouse faces when theirs is deployed, as being a solo parent at home with 3 little kids. So not being able to have answers or direction is really challenging right now for her especially.
So, you know, look, these incidents are very disturbing. I mean, what would drive someone to be at a point where they would be willing to do that, obviously is distressing to consider. But the families of sailors aboard the Lincoln are telling you about incidents like this. They're also telling you about some of these other truly stunning details, that the sailors are often hungry because there isn't enough food, that basic supplies, toothpaste, deodorant, aren't easy to get. Now, back in April, you know, and this has been going on a long time, we talk about this ship 250 days in a row without setting foot on land, a record. So this has been going on a long time. In April, Secretary Hegseth, dismissed reports about inadequate food. He said it was fake news. So what's the reaction to from the families that you're speaking to? They don't get to talk to their loved ones on board that ship that often. You know, what's their reaction when the defense secretary calls this all fake news?
Confusion, hurt, lack of understanding. They're constantly seeking some kind of reassurance or information. There's a lot of conflicting reports, a lot of different information, especially on social media within different groups and small.
I mean, wars are won and lost on supply chains. That's it. The American military's primacy or supremacy does not come from the fact that it has the coolest gear. It comes from the fact that it is supposed to be able to be everywhere in approximately 24 to 48 hours and can deliver necessary supplies all around the world, right? We have the best logistics in the game. Or at least we thought we did. Logistics is the most important part of this process. Not anymore, it seems. The enshittification has taken root in the American military as well. The attitude of the troops is a part of why the Vietnam War and numerous other expeditions that went on for far too long had to come to an end. We haven't seen the worst of it yet. In Vietnam, by the end of that 20-year occupation, troops would just straight up use grenades on their officers. Like they would just straight up kill their officers, right? It became a massive problem. So, buddy fucking, fragging their officers. This was a huge ordeal. So, obviously troop morale, that's pretty huge. That was a draft, of course. This here is a little bit different. These are professionals, if you want to consider it that. These are people who joined the military, joined the Navy with a certain set of expectations. I think one of those expectations is a level of comfort that they thought they would have. So I don't know if that actually plays into their anger and discontent more or less.
Welcome back.
Right?
Sir Crook joins us today, a former British...
Yeah, Alistair Crook talks about Iran and Russia giving up on diplomacy and going on the offensive on Glenn Deason, my favorite podcast, the Greater Eurasia podcast. I listen to it frequently. They have all my goats on. People that refuse to come on this broadcast, like Jonathan Goatsheimer. It's fine, though. One day.
Community pages. Those are the pages where organic conversations and relationships exist. Those aren't deep fakes or AI dupes being created. These are where families go to communicate. This is a lifeline for families who really never receive an instruction manual on how to handle your time when your loved one is deployed. So families are feeling left in the dark, and all families are agreeing that it is absolutely unacceptable and unthinkable to imagine.
Well, it's unthinkable, I think, for any American to hear this reporting, frankly, and deeply disturbing to imagine that sailors who are serving this country, going 250 days without setting foot on land, 9-month deployment, would have food shortages or any. It's upsetting. So we reached out to the Navy, Natalie, about your report, and they responded in a statement, and they said, quote, "We have not observed an increase in suicidal ideations or attempts aboard the ship. We are not experiencing an uptick in mental health issues aboard Abraham Lincoln." I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
My first question to that is an increase from what baseline? No increase from when? What does that measurement window look like? We did request deck logs and multiple FOIAs from the Navy, so hopefully we'll get those back and can review them independently. But until we do...
So this is one element that is creating a little bit of a stir-up, right? On the other side, I'm confident that the generals are probably not happy. You have to remember, the American military is, in some respects, the last competent organization in this country, okay? And it has increasingly become incompetent and has an over-reliance on private profiteers, private defense contractors. This has created a tremendous issue with procurement. This is causing additional problems. No general that has spent their entire lives working up the ranks of the military, and remember, these generals are highly competent and highly educated individuals, right, for the most part. These generals are not going to want to associate their name with such spectacular failure, okay? Getting rid of the woke generals that didn't want to play ball with the Trump administration's madness doesn't necessarily eliminate the problem, because even someone like Dan Kane, who's regarded as like Trump's most loyal general, right, is probably not going to be, he's probably not going to want his legacy associated, this entire institution associated with Trump's madness. Trump getting into further and further military quagmires, destroying American military supremacy, destroying American hegemony, destroying America's force projection capabilities. So there is also, on the one hand, you have, the rank and filers, the lowest of the low within the American military saying enough is enough. And on the other hand, you have the generals also probably frustrated by both the troop morale diminishing and also having to sit there and bear the responsibility of decisions that they knew they did not want to take on, decisions that they did not want to follow through on. And as time continues, I suspect, as this quagmire grows and there's more compounding incidents and more compounding problems, problems in the energy sector, problems in the economy, and problems such as our diminished munitions stockpile that leave us open to attacks from foreign adversaries, even if it's not realistic. You don't want to have no bullets, have no missiles in the stockpile, right? You have to have your defensive posture all the time. You're going to see more generals start going to the media and leaking information, regardless of how loyal they might have been in the past to Donald Trump.
All we have is our firsthand reporting and accounts from these family members who are experiencing this and living it day after day.
We've been hearing Donald Trump say the Strait of Hormuz is open. Everything is open, okay, which we know is not true to the extent he's implying. The U.S.S. Abraham Lincoln.
It's not true to any extent. Like, the implication is that it's open at all. It's not open at all. It's not even close to being open. It's just not true to any extent. You don't have to hand it to him. He has never stopped lying about this.
Been a part of that mission.
Yeah, it's also extra funny because, like, it's so not open that we've decided to close it ourselves as well. So there's that element too.
And we are hearing these reports from on board. A congressman tweeted out a report saying that basically 5,000 sailors are on board. They're on month 9 of what was supposed to be a 7-month deployment. And the conditions are horrendous. Moldy showers, broken toilets, no hot water for weeks, meals that were down to half a cup of rice and 2 tortillas, stores out of deodorant, toothpaste, all this stuff. The Navy is saying, look, we haven't seen anything, literally.
They haven't had any port call in over 200 days. Shit is crazy. We only had one period where we went 60 days without a port call. The reporting about the food conditions that it's coming out also lines up exactly with my experience, where we lost the ability to restock basic supplies just due to where we were at. Friendly Waters with 3 carriers. They stocked the vending machines with mint and fucking sardines, law. Yeah, I just don't understand how the supply lines are just so busted. Is it that far away? I guess. Dog, they ignored multiple signs the dude was unwell. Exclusive, the wife of the U.S.S Lincoln sailor who jumped overboard last week says she wasn't notified about the incident until 4 days after, and said her husband repeatedly expressed concerns over his mental health, but was brushed off. I guess they just didn't put him on a healthy enough diet of TRT. I mean, how are you going to deliver the HRT to these big, beautiful soldiers? I don't even know. If you can't deliver them fruits and vegetables and they're spoiling because you're too far out. Yeah, Fifth Fleet headquarters was destroyed. Oh, that's the reason? Is that where the supply chains come from? It's Bahrain. So Iran dunking on the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain and just, exploding it, eliminated one of the supply lines. Now, this is part of the reason why I keep saying it was hilarious that they were entertaining the notion of a full-blown military invasion of Qeshm Island, Karg Island, the Iranian coastline. This is literally why I kept repeatedly explaining to you that this was not going to happen, because You cannot, even if you defeat the conventional military on the island, okay, without too many casualties, you have no way of holding the islands. You have no way of setting up a forward operating base on these islands. You have no way of just sitting there because you have no supply lines. Because every base in the region, you said Russia wasn't invading Ukraine too? Buddy, I think it's kind of wild to try to hold on to that at this stage when I have shown time and time again in the last 3 years that I was absolutely vindicated on Israel versus the Palestinian population, and certainly on the Iran war. It's kind of crazy to just be like, oh, remember, I'm a time traveler from 2022. That's a wild thing to say, especially because all of my opposition this time around for the last 3 years has one time and time again shown that they're wrong. You know, it's tough for you guys, but the best you can do is go back to 2022. You know, you're going to have to come up with something new here. And even on Ukraine, I said this would be a spectacular quagmire for Russia as well as devastating for Ukraine, and I wasn't wrong on that. My fault. My biggest mistake was assuming that a foreign adversary like Vladimir Putin would be operating on a rational basis and not as an irrational madman, something that I willingly recognize. It's changed the way I do commentary now. I no longer, as you guys know, do not view Vladimir Putin as a rational actor. I do not view Donald Trump as a rational actor. And I do not view Benjamin Netanyahu as a rational actor either. So, you know, my mistake. Straight up. That's a course correction from me. The reason why I will readily admit that is because it's clear that the previous international relations framework that we have operated off of, where foreign adversaries and the American government operate on a rational basis, is wrong. Okay? It's no way to conduct adequate analysis. You can't do that. You can't conduct rational analysis if the actors are irrational. But unfortunately, we are led by a bunch of emotional, narcissistic, petty, despotic tyrants who are actively throwing the world in a state of panic and disarray for a set of stranger and more personal ambitions. Okay? That's it. Amerikanyet says stop the hashtag Reaper genocide at UN. That's another point to the irrationality of the Trump administration, as we are simply feeding our MQ-9 Reaper drones, roughly 25% of the fleet, into the Iranian anti-air defense systems. We just keep feeding the beast, and the beast seemingly is hungry for more. 25% of its entire fleet lost at least 45 MQ-9 Reaper drones during the war with Iran. The high-demand drones cost between $30 million and $50 million apiece. That's your healthcare on fire, folks. I just need you to understand that's your healthcare. When people say, Yemen's going to find out why we don't have healthcare, that's what Yemen is finding out. You know what they're finding out? They're going, wait a minute, these guys don't have healthcare and they're sending us these drones that we can destroy? So what is going on with this money? Iran has taken out at least a quarter of the global MQ-9 fleet. Yemen destroyed at least 10%, and Iran has taken out 25%. The potential taxpayer cost of recent losses is over $1.3 billion for that weapons system alone. Hold on, I'm tweeting. U.S.S George Washington dispatched. Yeah, I saw that. U.S.S George Washington is headed to the Middle East to relieve U.S.S Abraham Lincoln, according to some reports. This is just coming in today. The aircraft carrier U.S.S George Washington will be sent to the Arabian Sea to replace U.S.S Abraham Lincoln, which has been deployed for over 250 days, according to multiple reports. The move was first reported Thursday by Wall Street Journal. CNN is also reporting the decision, citing a U.S. official. The Office of the Chief of Naval Operations said it could not discuss plans for either carrier because of operational security concerns. The George Washington, the Navy's only forward deployed aircraft carrier, is based in Japan. The decision to send Washington to the region was a part of a regularly scheduled deployment, according to the Wall Street Journal, which cited U.S. officials. The change comes amid reports of sailors aboard Lincoln struggling with the strain of lengthy deployment, including reports of attempts by some crew members to jump overboard. Is this rage bait for Hassan? What is this? Wonderful. Money well spent, folks. Money well spent. I, for one, think this is the best use of our resources. I, for one, believe that there is no better use for our resources than this. Okay? What are you, some kind of America-hating pussy? You think we should be spending all this money, all of our productive output, all of our resources on ourselves, building our roads, building our infrastructure, building a robust manufacturing base, making sure that the next class of Americans, the next generation of Americans actually have a better education overall. They can be more competitive in the global marketplace, become more innovative, become more competitive. What are you, some kind of libtarded pussy? No thanks. No thank you. What I would like is to continue waging endless fucking wars, okay? That's right. I love bombs. I love bombing the third world. I love wars. I hate taking care of Americans. I hate it. That's real patriotism. That is real patriotism, all at the behest of a handful, just a select few petro-capitalist pedophiles. That is what I love. Yes, clip this, Fox News. Put me on board. Give me a fucking $2 million a year contract right now. Neera Tanden is on the line saying, hey, can we put you on the fucking board of the Center for American Progress? You got a bright future ahead of you, kid. That's what they're saying. That's right. Clip it and ship it, baby. I love war. Endless amounts of it. That's what we should be spending all of our resources on. Now I get why Pete Hegseth was on the decoy plane. Yes, Trump needs a handsome media guy to run the goddamn Department of War. I will be that handsome media guy. I will be your new Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump. I'm going to start drinking right now. You give me the job, I'll be just as drunk. And I can do just as many pull-ups and push-ups and crunches, suck off our brave troops side by side, you know? Have you been possessed by the ghost of Lindsey Graham? Yep. He took over my body. I couldn't believe this headline, so I tracked down the original report and it left me even more stunned. SM3 block for 64 months, THAAD 53 months, SM6 53 months, and PAC3 42 months. All require 3.5 to 5.5 years from contract award to lot completion. Yeah. Replacing an SM3 interceptor takes up about 64 months. The U.S. just spent half of his stock on Iran. It's kind of funny because it was woke General Mark Milley alongside that dickhead Palmer Luckey that said that this was a real issue with the American procurement strategy years ago on NPR. I remember listening to that terrified. Not terrified because of what it means for American security, but terrified because these guys were signaling that they wanted to make some necessary changes and signal that Silicon Valley was entering the realm of defense. And since that has happened, we haven't really seen a lot of improvements at all. Because the American military-industrial complex does not have the ultimate goal of survival. Its ultimate goal is not to develop weapons for survival. Its ultimate goal is profit. And when your ultimate goal is profit, yeah, you're going to get it's a money pit. There's going to be a tremendous defense bloat. The enshittification is destroying the military-industrial complex as well. It's making us less competent. It's destroying American military readiness. It's the last remaining American institution, last remaining competent American organization, and even that is falling apart. This is capitalism in crisis. This is capitalism eating itself, destroying itself. Because without the American military, you can no longer have global capitalism either. Because without the American military, you can't have American imperialism. And without American imperialism, you are going to inevitably go back and try to squeeze the stone for as much water as possible from the American domestic labor force. You know, fascism, which is colonialism turned inward. Doors open. That's where we're at, folks. That's where we're at. Fox News can run as many articles as they want from my my Yale Union speech about the age of American empire being over, about America being in a state of permanent decay. They can yell about how scary that is, how scary my words are on that matter. But that doesn't change the reality. The reality that I mentioned on that speech, in that speech, which is the reality that it's over, it's done. We are an empire in decline. So as Americans, it's important for us to control the reins once again, to have a say in this process, to try to manage that decline, to try to manage that retreat, to make sure that it's as safe and secure for Americans as possible, and it's as safe and secure for the periphery. That is the ultimate argument. You can try to make it seem as though my statements are scary. I said the USSR, the implosion of the USSR was bad for the rest of the world. How dare you say that? You're a communist sympathizer. Fuck you. You can try to pull on the heartstrings of the reactionary masses all day, every day. At the end of the day, you are running out of bullets. You are running out of missiles. You cannot even manage a middling regional power like Iran. If you cannot dominate Iran, you definitely cannot dominate China. And the faster we acknowledge that reality, the easier and the more manageable this decline will be. If you cannot dominate far, far poorer enemies that have far less resources, whose economies we are capable of destroying by way of our sanctions regime, and yet when push comes to shove, when they're fighting an existential war and we're fighting a war simply for profit, we lose. You can't keep up the charade. The very fact that we were incapable of bringing the Houthis to heel, Yemen being a country that we have blockaded, that we'd created man-made famine in by way of Saudi Arabia's embargo, by way of Saudi Arabia's blockade, a country like that, the poorest country on the planet, was capable of withstanding our blockade, winning the civil war, and then fighting back against Israeli and American hegemony in the region and succeeding. That should have been the warning sign that we were incapable of fighting back against Iran, which is a far more industrially developed nation, a nation for the past 47 years that had hardened its defenses, hardened its manufacturing capabilities to withstand American bunker buster bombs, whose entire strategy revolves around low-cost drone strikes and relatively affordable missiles, medium-range ballistic munitions that they deployed all around the region, destroyed billions of dollars worth of assets, and embarrassed the United States of America with. But if we didn't learn that lesson from the Houthis and still did this to Iran, I don't know if we will learn that lesson from Iran and then try not to do this to China. China, which is exponentially more powerful than Iran. This is the argument of strategic retreat. This is the argument that I present when talking about the death of American empire. Whether we have a say in it or not, it's still happening. All empires fall at the end of the day, and it's clear that we're living through our empire's decline. So I present an alternative vision that puts the American labor force and the American working class back in the driver's seat. But it feels like Americans are just leaning into a hope and a dream and thinking about the glory days of American empire and refusing to recognize where we truly are at. The Houthis control 28% of Yemen today. If it weren't for Saudi intervention, they control 100% of Yemen. So that's not a good analogy, to be honest. No, that actually further proves my point. You're literally talking about an ascetic brigand, like an ascetic band of Zaidi Shias who are capable of literally dominating and bringing to heel the world's most powerful military. My point on the Houthis is not that they are a group of individuals that have established dominance over the entirety of Yemen. It's actually further proving my point. These guys can't even control the entire territory, their own country, and yet they are able to control what America can and can't do in their own backyard. America, which has the most powerful military on the planet, the most expensive military on the planet, had to wave the white flag after Operation Prosperity Guardian, and they did it twice, once under Biden and once under Donald Trump. That is remarkable. This is a funny tweet from April 16th, 2025 from this guy on Blue Sky Weedle. He says, people make fun of Sun Tzu for his advice being basic stuff like, remember, your soldiers need food. But considering most military commanders through history were inbred fail sons of nobility, you can see why it was necessary. Pete Hegseth is not going to remember his soldiers' need for food. And that is literally what has happened. So I guess in that regard, we're going back to the old hits. We got inbred fail sons running the fucking military, right? So yeah, it turns out Sun Tzu still correct after all these years. Apparently, this is the food being supplied right now on U.S.S Lincoln. Disastrous. What is this thing, dude? Someone needs to explain to me what this like shiny piece is. This is so funny. Here's a half a chicken nugget, dude. What the hell is this thing? That's meatloaf, bro. That looks like straight up plastic. Protein bar from Snowpiercer. Yeah. The American military's invented something far greater than microplastics. They're calling it macroplastics. That's boy dinner. It's poop from a butt. Anyway, military families confront acting Navy secretary, which also is another hilarious psychopath. His name is Hung Kao. Totally insane guy. Again, at every level, if you're a general, imagine going through the military academy. You're serving in combat, right? You read all the books. You've seen battle. Your life has been under threat time and time again. You've served this country for decades. And after decades of service, you got the Navy being run by a guy named Hung Kao, who was a psychopath, like a QAnon guy. And you got the entire Department of Defense, now known as Department of War, being run by a drunk rapist fail son who was the weekend host of Fox News. And the entire reason why these guys are put into positions of power is because they're fucking insane, but they're unbelievably loyal to the incompetent monster that is Donald Trump, who's sending your ass over to increasingly worse conditions, sending your troops over to die potentially in more precarious instances of combat that they're directly getting their nose from Israel on. That's gotta hurt. Okay, that's gotta frustrate you. Lean into that frustrations, King.
Sailors and Marines
put an end to this nonsense.
Facing horrific conditions on an aircraft carrier that's deployed to the war in Iran confronted the acting Secretary of the Navy at a fiery town hall last week. That's according to two sources who attended the meeting who I spoke with. I first reported about the conditions on the U.S.S. Lincoln last week after speaking to about a dozen of the family members of the Marines and sailors on board. They told me about things like non-operational toilets, moldy showers, and the ship's store lacking basic hygiene products like toothpaste, soap, and deodorant. The Lincoln's deployment appears to be extended for a second time, and they just hit a modern-day record in the Navy for the most continuous days at sea, topping 200 days. Many of the family members who spoke...
Like, remember, this is the type of shit that the Navy had to do in, like, the Pacific Theater in World War II, you know? Like, fighting against the Japanese imperial forces, fighting against fascism, right? And now we're doing this because we're basically Israel's private mercenary force in the region. Why do we have to do this? There's no existential threat. As a matter of fact, it's creating an existential threat for the rest of the world. right? Like we're just straight up doing this as like mercenary brigands, a private military for hire for Israel's belligerence and Israel's needs in the region. It is insane to me. It's also really funny because all these people said over and over again, I'm not dying for Israel. They said, I'm not dying for Israel. Kamala Harris will send us to wage war with Israel. That's why I'm voting for Trump. That's what they said. And now that reality is unfolding and they don't got a damn thing to say. What happened? What the fuck happened?
Up at the meeting were crying about the lack of hygiene products on board. And they say that they're also really worried about the fact that these long hours with very little breaks could lead to exhaustion, which could potentially lead to accidents. At times, the family members were crying in the meeting, saying that they were really worried about the fact that their loved ones were facing food shortages and also shortages in basic supplies. At one point, a woman actually said that she found it difficult to be proud of her husband's service because he had actually been questioning the mission after he had seen several news reports about innocent civilians being killed in Iran.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think the military does? I'm sorry, that's literally the job.
Comment was met with applause from the audience. Now, Navy leaders said that they're planning on sending the U.S.S Theodore Roosevelt, another aircraft carrier, in the...
Like there are, okay, I need to explain something to you, right? Like there are moments throughout history where the rubber meets the road, where the dog catches the car, you know, where people are forced to reckon with the reality that's unfolding in front of their eyes, and the institutions that previously could at least communicate an alternative set of facts, an alternative reality, can no longer lie to people. One example that I use always is your wallet, right? Like Donald Trump can lean into these primal, these different kinds of like racial animus, transgender athletes. Like there's a couple different choice culture war issues that Donald Trump can lean into over and over again when things are going moderately well or things are actually deteriorating, but in a slow enough pace that the average person doesn't recognize it. One example I can use, of course, is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, right? There's a level that you can't get to with our Strategic Petroleum Reserve because there is a cataclysmic impact that compounds on top of one another once we reach a certain level. Once the Strategic Petroleum Reserves are depleted past the 150 million barrel line, the salt caverns basically implode, okay? That's just a hard commodity necessary for survival. There's going to be compounding factors. And then once the salt caverns collapse in and of itself because there's not enough pressure, there's nothing you can do. You can't say gas prices are going to remain the same when there's just simply no gas, when there's simply no oil. There is nothing you can do at that point. You can't out-yap what people are experiencing, the crisis that people are experiencing. And then the entire system collapses. That's the point of no return. And given that I said earlier that I no longer treat Trump as a rational actor, I'm not so confident that Trump won't go down that rabbit hole. I'm not so confident that Trump won't keep pushing past that line thinking everything is going to be okay. It's clear that this is one of the driving forces of Trump too. The idea that everything works out in the end. Well, what happens when it doesn't? So far, as we've talked about, markets and munitions and also midterms are the three pressure points for Donald Trump. Markets are doing all right. You know, look at the Dow. Donald Trump has been able to, and also gotten a lot of help from China here as well with their strategic petroleum reserves. Donald Trump has been able to at least out-yap the markets to make sure that there's still confidence. He keeps saying he's waging war with Iran and then saying Iran is begging for a ceasefire. And these assurances have, for some reason, worked. These assurances, spot traders, China's interest in maintaining market stability and dramatically reducing its imports have allowed the world not to get into a full state of panic. But Trump's reassurances are increasingly less reliable. Because every single time he says this, well, people can still track how much oil we're using and how little oil we have that remains in the strategic petroleum reserves. And when you actually go to Donald Trump directly, this is from the Clash Report, he says things like this. Trump said, this is from August 9th, Trump said the U.S. is low-keying it with Iran and is only semi-negotiating while watching the country's worsening economic situation. He said Iran is in very bad shape and has little money to pay its troops. It will work out. It always works out. It's like a chess game, Trump said. Nothing bad can happen. Only good can happen. That is our moronic president.